I'll be reading our paper, but after that, Marcie and I will be taking questions together as a team. In October 2012, the University of Winnipeg staff and faculty club held a Halloween party. The lunchtime event was advertised as a costume competition to be judged by club board members. Partygoers went as the cheeseburger, Minnie Mouse, a French philosopher, and comic book characters, among other outfits. But a theater department faculty member, Michael, a pseudonym he chose for the sake of anonymity in relation to our research, attended in blackface makeup as Michael Jackson and performed the dance from Jackson's popular 1980s Thriller video. Subsequently, the judges' panel chose Michael's as the best costume. Contrary to the apparent judgment that this presentation was socio-politically benign, we argue that any current blackface expression inescapably links to historical minstrel shows and other performances which were and are part of the oppression of North Americans of African origin. Drawing on cultural theorist Katrin Seek's concept of ethnic drag, we argue that racial masquerade as performed by white-identified people, no matter their intention, expresses and maintains dominance over the identities and bodies of racial others, assumed through makeup, costume, and performance. Following a brief outline of blackface history, we explore the specifics of this performance and its racist implications, drawing on 4 interviews with participants and observers at the party. In the late 19th century, blackface in the southern USA emerged as a reflection of essentialized notions of black culture as signified and produced by black bodies. Historian W.T. Lemon Jr. traces the origins of American blackface to Catherine Market, an historical trading post on Long Island, New York. Black slaves, after dropping off their white master's produce, would dance and sing for white merchants in exchange for eels, a less desirable and inexpensive fish for their own consumption. The dance style appealed to white market-goers, inspiring them to congregate at Catherine Market to pay for that style and copy it. Thus, Catherine Market became more than just a place to buy and sell produce. It was also a cultural marketplace, sparking the beginning of blackface performances as what historian Eric Lott calls one of America's first culture industries. Whether historical or modern, blackface and minstrelsy benefit white performers at the expense of black bodies and expressions of tokenized black culture. Seek describes racial masquerade like blackface as ethnic drag, which she defines as the impersonation of ethnic others by a subject that stages and conceals its dominance. In ethnic drag, the performer enacts the terms of multiculturalism in the form of a series of displacements, excluding the material bodies of cultural others and subsumes the markers of difference. In historic blackface and minstrelsy, mimetic signifiers of black ethnicity were collected by white performers who visited multicultural sites such as racially integrated theaters, taverns, neighborhoods, and waterfronts. In order to mock stereotypical black faces, performers used grease paint to cover and darken the exposed white skin, as well as red and white makeup to exaggerate the size of their lips. During the era in which blackface performances flourished as a social right that elites wanted to harness, white's dominance over black bodies and culture was so extensive that white performers could exploit their white audience's racist naivete, convincing them that they were actually black. Sometimes, in order to credit white performers, promoters began picturing blackface performers out of costume to prove their whiteness, simultaneously showcasing their talent for allegedly authentic impersonations of black people. As minstrelsy and blackface continued well into the 20th century, so did widespread assumptions of white supremacy. Excuse me. Popular beliefs and stereotypes represented black people as inherently dim, slow-witted, lazy, and licentious, and blackface performances aimed to enact such racist stereotypes. By the 1950s, blackface came under public attack by American rights groups, such as the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, as well as white allies, as racist, demeaning to blacks, and a means of perpetuating negative stereotypes. While this action seeking to remove blackface performances from mainstream entertainment was mostly successful, such enactments nevertheless continue. In the absence of minstrel shows on stage and film, 21st century instances of blackface performances emerge frequently at Halloween, including on university campuses in both Canada and the United States. In the 2012 University of Winnipeg's Business Administration Students Association Halloween party also saw revelers in blackface and other forms of ethnic drag. When confronted, 21st century blackface costumers claim ignorance of blackface's undisputable racist history. They usually argue that their intentions were not racist, but instead in spirit with Halloween and consistent with university pride. We argue, however, that this defensive distancing extends the exploitation of white privilege and the racist legacy of white supremacy. We were informed of the blackface performance at the university where we work as research assistants by Jenny Henkelman, an accessibility services staff member who attended the Halloween party as a cheeseburger. Jenny told us that staff and faculty were invited to come to the lunchtime party in costume, with the stipulation that outfits worn be work appropriate. Jenny, a self-identified white feminist anti-racist, said that working in a bureaucratic environment, like I do, I feel I'm most comfortable when I behave within the confines of the expected behavior for that environment. I do believe in appropriate behavior for certain situations. Another staff member who attended, Alex Kashanja, a man of color born in Kenya, reflected on Michael's blackface costume, that it seems work appropriate is different for different people. Clearly, this woman and this man of color paid attention and adhered to an asserted but unspecified dress code, while a white man apparently neglected to reflect on the impact that a blackface costume would have on co-workers. Indeed, as Jenny expressed, I feel like dressing in blackface is like spewing your privilege all over everyone. Historian Mark Berger speaks to historical blackface performances as having expressed both fear and desire, disavowal and identification. The contestable understanding of blackface performances, he argues, helps explain how both abolitionist and pro-slavery Americans could attend and appreciate the same performances by drawing on those elements of the spectacle that resonated with their own views. Indeed, we noticed that interviewers sometimes spoke about blackface in similar terms, despite the disagreements about its appropriateness and value. Notably, Jenny is disappointed that blackface performances are generally understood as controversial, which to her means that some people think it's okay and some people think that it isn't, as opposed to just being unacceptable. Alex believes that blackface is generally understood as conditionally racist because of the anxiety white Canadians feel in discussing issues of race and racism. He told us that, in his experience, Canadians are very uncomfortable about talking about race. I don't take offense to even the notion of talking about race, and I think a lot of white Canadians have that problem, and I've seen it. How do you critique something that you're not entirely sure is offensive? When asked about what they know of blackface, Jenny and Alex denounced historical blackface, just as they denounced Michael's costume. Remarkably, Alex recalled his experience of watching a British minstrel show on television in Kenya as a child. I'm not sure why we got it in Kenya, or how we got it. I just can't remember why. But I remember seeing people dressed up, white people dressed up in black makeup, caricaturing black people in general in terms of culture. On the other hand, Visan Arujoti, the university's events and conferences manager, producer of the Halloween party, as well as a judge of the costume competition, was seemingly unaware of the history of blackface. He expressed surprise and anxiety at hearing the word blackface, but in attempting to articulate its cultural significance, said, "Whoa, I don't know anything about blackface, other than the word blackface. If you had told me, I would have thought it was like a gang, or an underground music group. You say blackface, it's like, bam." After we explained our understandings of blackface to Visan, he would not recognize Michael's costume as relating to racist aspects of historical blackface performances. He also sought that the understanding of blackface be kept completely neutral throughout his interview. He insisted that Michael's intentions were not racist, and that his costume reflected only his talent and his passion for Michael Jackson. As one of the judges, Visan felt the panel was convinced that Michael Jackson was in the room for those 7 minutes that he performed. He further defended the costume, saying that Michael was a very genuine person who appreciated art, who loved what he did. So I don't want to discourage an artist, especially at a university where we advocate so much art and also arts programs. After sharing his experiences of racism growing up as a person of color in Malaysia, Visan felt that his experiences with racism gave him license to claim Michael's costume was not racist, simply because he did not experience it as such. Visan did not want to be held accountable for a mistake that was made by a group of white race people, as he wants some freedom to excite his creativity without facing such hurdles and problems. Evidently, he did not want to tarnish the perceived success of his Halloween event when confronted by criticism of Michael's costume. Visan justified his choice for the Best Costume Award because of the party's success, due to Michael acting as a social lubricant. He moved around, he spoke to everybody, and people came to him to talk about his costume, and then they got to know about other people. So, as an events planner, I was happy. My decision was based solely on all of this. When we asked Michael himself what he knew about blackface, he said that he knew it's got a pretty funny history, as well as a bit of a shady history in that sense, and has some racial, racist undertones. He described historic blackface costumes as white guys in the simple sort of tuxedo kind of suit who would just paint their faces black. Not black, but brown. Also funny things like the lips are just left white, and it looked unrealistic in that way and stuff. He added that, as a child, he used to watch the film The Jolson Story, a biopic about the famous early 20th century blackface performer Al Jolson, with his father. To prove his knowledge of historical blackface performances, Michael sang a few lines from the iconic song Mammy, made famous in Jolson's repertoire. While he spoke to the funny history of whites exploiting black bodies, he did not acknowledge such exploitation as part of his own blackface performance. Instead, he compartmentalized the racism of blackface's shady history as purely unrealistic representations of black culture, measured against the realism of his own makeup and costume. Folklorist Carsten Bergenhoe and Han Pico Larsen, discussing Nordic mumming traditions, note that amusement, entertainment, and fun is mentioned considerably more often from the standpoint of the performer, that is the person in disguise, than from that of the spectator. Indeed, Michael is certain that all responses to his disguise and costume are positive. He understands onlookers' disbelief and confusion as indications of his costume's authenticity and quality, or even of his own ability to pass as black. It seems not to have hitherto occurred to Michael that some onlookers may react negatively to a white man in blackface makeup. Yet we know that some responses to this event in particular question the implications of an academic institution rewarding such a performance by a faculty member. Alex, for example, expressed his frustration at Michael winning Best Costume, saying, for him to win in the outfit that he was, it was almost as if, he sighs, rewarding the idea that stereotypes are okay. His response also spoke to his sense of safety as a person of color, watching the performance happen, telling us it really pushed buttons, and for me, that was a bit of a dangerous place to be. Jenny was shocked when she realized that she was looking at a white person in blackface, and made it part of her reaction to alert the people around her. I tried to elicit some response by saying things like, is there really someone in blackface at this party? I did say that out loud. Not very loudly, but I said it, and no one responded to my statement. Michael, while admitting that his performances could be understood as racist, grants himself permission to perform in blackface because of his personal investment in building his costume and his devotion as a Michael Jackson fan. I understand the blackface issue and that sort of thing, but I put so much care and time into it. I wouldn't say that it removes me from that, like the racist channel and stuff, but if you were to just do a crummy Bob Marley outfit or something, if it's just sort of half-assed, then in that sense it would be inappropriate. Michael also told us that his Thriller costume is a perfect Halloween costume because of its popular culture connection to the festival. Folklorist John H. McDowell argues that costumers thrive on the reactions they provoke, and recognition is gained for one's cleverness or skill in costuming. McDowell's theory resonates in Michael's reflection on the responses he receives while in costume as Michael Jackson. The first reaction that he will give you, it's great. It's not just, oh, that's a person in a Halloween costume. They're just stunned that they're almost looking at the real Michael Jackson, and that total look of disbelief and confusion, that's an excellent reaction, and I've had that too, so that's always fun. However, when questioned if he thinks that Halloween is a special time when people have license to dress as who or whatever they want, Michael told us, no, not who or whatever you want. I mean, it's gone so crazy far. Girls will just find the sluttiest costumes. Slutty Red Riding Hood, slutty Bumblebee, which is fine, you know? They look very, very sexy in their silly little costumes. No, you can't just go crazy without not any costume, without any idea of the impact and who you might offend or not. In a narrative of sexism and misogyny, as well as denial, Michael attempts to deflect the offensive nature of its blackface performance at the expense of women who choose hypersexual Halloween costumes. Notably, in her interview, Jenny remarked that Halloween is the most racistful time of the year. She makes no judgments of women choosing to wear hypersexual costumes, though she affirms it is not a choice she herself would make. Michael describes his intentions in terms of artistic expression, homage to Michael Jackson, and liberation from his boredom with just being the standard white male American heterosexual thing. Articulating his white male and American, though he lives in Canada, privilege as things to be liberated from underscores that Michael understands identity as not only temporary constructions, but also objects, property, and commodities for appropriation. He goes on to explain his relationship to his whiteness as one of discomfort, saying, "Sometimes I'm more comfortable in my skin when it isn't even mine. When I'm Michael, I am Michael Jackson. When I'm Michael, I am not me at all. It's just complete anonymity for me." He also told us that because of his blackface makeup, he is closer to being Michael in that sense. So it always gets me closer to the actual character. It's just makeup. I'm just a regular, crazy white guy underneath this. If they're surprised by that, then I would take that as just another compliment. Really, I've done a good job representing that character. However, we agree with Alex's criticism of Michael's makeup when he said, "Would this costume have worked without the blackface? I think yes." While taking advantage of the supposed multicultural space of the Canadian Liberal Arts University, Michael, in line with Sieg's concept of ethnic drag, impersonated an ethno-racial other. Though he sees his own presentation as concealing his dominance and whiteness, for the sake of his boredom with that privilege, we see the performance as a fundamental expression of it. Michael displaced and excluded Jackson's black body as the origin of the performance, as well as temporarily assimilating Jackson's blackness as his own. While his expressed intention was artistic homage, because he dedicated hours of work to his costume and makeup, Michael believes his performance is free from racism because of his realistic caricature of Michael Jackson. Given that white audiences considered historical blackface as realistic impersonation, or even as performances by actual black folk, Michael's strategies of denial failed to mute the irrefutable racism that resonates in his enactment. We note queer performance artist Anthony Hudson's commentary on Chuck Nip, a queer performer known for its blackface renditions of Shirley Q. Liquor, a stereotypical Southern black mother on welfare. In solidarity with black activists and community members protesting its performance at a Portland area gay bar in April 2013, Hudson said, "To reject criticism or consequence, or to simply defer to attention, rather than acknowledging the actual effects of one's work, regardless of attention, is bullshit, and the sign of a lazy artist. Intention does not ensure innocence, nor does artistry preclude accountability. These are alibis, obscuring a deep-seated and inescapable racism that should be resisted, always." Thank you.
Did anybody, when you were interviewing Michael, ask him about the weird fact that he's doing blackface with somebody who has had more plastic surgery and skin whitening than any other black entertainer in history?
Yes,
So,
that was a pretty detailed conversation. I actually ended up interviewing Michael twice and used both sides of both tapes. But he did talk about Michael's surgery, but he didn't bring it up in a narrative as though it excuses or necessarily makes space for him to also, how am I going to say this? He didn't interpret it as making space for him to give him permission to do blackface.
No, it was more a matter of that if he's aiming for verisimilitude, not doing a quote-unquote half-assed job, then he should have, embedded all that weirdness into his own performance rather than doing it as his idealized notion of a blackface, right?
Yeah. Well, he does multiple performances. Like, he actually hires himself out as a Michael Jackson impersonator. He also teaches how to dance like Michael Jackson to dancers in Winnipeg, and he also teaches here in the theater department. So there's multiple different performances. However, I have not witnessed the other ones, unfortunately.
Just a little add-on comment. I understand that this guy is an instructor who teaches people how to dance like Michael Jackson, but there's also, maybe the Wii game, the Michael Jackson Experience, which has taught millions and tens of millions of people around the world how to teach exactly like Michael Jackson. And I would go back to your comment, David, that it doesn't make a difference if you actually put on blackface or don't, even though Michael Jackson is such an interesting case of racial performance. But that all those Wii dancers, they are, you could read it through the lens of blackface as well. And of course that's licensed by the Jackson clan.
Yep.
I actually don't play video games, so I don't know about that game, but yeah, I totally agree with you.
I think Alison was the next person.
Amazing presentation.
Thank you.
Amazing piece of ethnography. So what's the future look like in terms of policy? Have you guys made any kind of impact on?
Like any intervention?
Yeah, in terms of what's going to happen next year or response to your work?
No, actually, I know that a few folks from the administration are aware of our research and what happened, and there's actually members of the faculty club board members were on the judges panel, and other faculty members were also on the judges panel for the competition. We've had Hassan report to us that he had a conversation with his supervisor about what happened, but we don't know the results of that conversation, and no one's approached us from Human Resources to talk about policy or anything, but we've definitely tried to have conversations and try to have little birds out there that can report back to us.
I mean, it's kind of mind-boggling to think that there would be no response based on the university's reputation as a global college.
Well, there's that. I did a critical race analysis of all of the University of Winnipeg's policies, and I would actually suggest that the UW's policies actually facilitate an environment where there's permission for something like this to happen. And the platform of diversity that the university likes to market itself on is actually, there's no evidence other than the administration seeing that there's not just white folks coming to the university to suggest that there's diversity. There's actually no demographic information held about race, ethnicity, anything other than First Nation status. So it's actually a bunch of bullshit. The diversity and multiculturalism platform of marketing here. Jenny.
Thanks. We've talked a little bit about the alibi of artistry, and I think that you guys covered that really well in your paper. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit of the alibi of craziness, which
Mental
made
illness?
its way, yes, which in one case is ableist, obviously. On the other hand, it could also just be this kind of, oh, I'm so wacky, it's just my personality to wear blackface. So I was wondering if you've thought about those elements. I mean, it made its way into the title of your paper.
Yeah. Okay. I can compare it to something that just recently happened, and I can't remember the name of the young man, but he was the young man who recently went on his murderous rampage against women, and it was a misogynist attack against women, and so he's being spoke of in the media as mentally ill, that was the reason why he did that, and it completely undermines the fact that it was driven by misogyny. And it's the same thing for this context, saying that you're mentally ill or whatever undermines the fact that it was driven by racism, and that folks who have racist worldviews are just unwell, and that they haven't been socialized to understand the world that way.
And also I feel like white people are afforded that positive trait of, I'm just crazy, I'm wacky, I'm eccentric, you can love me, but when a person of color tries to claim the same characteristic, they're seen with disdain, or like, yeah, you're actually loony, So,
Or exotic and fetishized.
Exactly,
Yeah.
big time.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering if there was any discussion or thought in terms of the blackface situation around the construct with privilege and choice, because I'm a person of color, I can't remove my color. So this person can put on a blackface and remove it. So there's a choice there, and whether or not the person is being racist, I'm not looking at that. I'm looking at the fact that the construct is there to be racializing and not realize that perhaps I'm this kind of relational person, so I always try to look for the good. And maybe this person doesn't realize, but the thing is, the fact remains that this person can take off a face and put on a face. I can't. So, and a lot of people of color can't. So I'm just wondering, was there any discussion around that and that power and privilege that's embedded within all of this?
Okay. So the second time I interviewed him, I asked him if he would go out in public in non-performance in blackface. And he at first said yes, and then he said no, because that would be inappropriate, but also because he likes to put on blackface because of the anonymity that it gives him. It gives him a different identity, and he feels like if he were to go to the mall dressed in blackface in his casual clothing, then everyone would be looking at him, and he doesn't want everyone to be looking at him. So he's aware that he is making choices, and that there's at least other places besides his workplace where it would be inappropriate to be in blackface.
Well, don't put him in the middle of the public, take him to Watts. I mean, put him in a situation where there's
Well, actually,
social approbation, but I mean, the actual.
He also told me that he's gone to children's birthday parties as Michael Jackson in blackface and plays with the children, and he will notice the parents' reactions are looking at him, and he made the link that it was due to Michael's history of pedophilia, not actually that there was a white guy in blackface at a party playing with children. Yeah.
I don't know, I think that, yeah, I mean, I feel like Michael, you know, he wants to be Michael Jackson, but he was not ready to, I don't know, carry the social implications of having, you know, black skin. And I was talking to some other people about this work as well, and I think this kind of, I don't know, I think it kind of structurized it, but like, I had someone come up to me and say, well, what if a person just, you know, just genuinely wants to be this character, you know, who happens to be black and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, well, let's look at Forrest Whitaker, for example. You know, the guy is an Academy Award winner, and I think that he's instantly recognizable. But at the end of the day, he was at a convenience store in Colorado or Cleveland or something, and he was still shadowed and followed around by the employee of the convenience store. So yeah, you can still be this awesome actor, you know, who a lot of people love and a lot of people recognize, but you have black skin, you're still gonna carry all those implications with you.
Like when Oprah went to try and buy a purse in Europe.
Exactly.
And it was, yes.
Yeah.
I think Coral and then.
I'm just curious about whether or not there was further discussion with some of the other judges on the panel. Because I heard you talking about Hassan and some of the different reasons that he might, why he may have responded the way he did. And I'm curious if there was other discussions with folks with maybe different reasons or similar.
We actually did try contacting other judges, and they didn't want to participate with us.
Kristen.
I sort of, after you had these interviews with Michael, then obviously he was doing a lot of sort of trying to justify why he did it. And did you think that it made him think about it? Do you think it made him self-reflective? Do you think it might make him think twice about wearing that again? Or do you think he's sort of convinced in his sort of right to use blackface?
Well, I actually haven't talked to him since our last interview, but some of the pictures, like the one of him in the red leather jacket, is from the 90s. So he's been doing this for a long time, and he's been practicing this for a long time, and it's going to take, I think, a lot more than our intervention and our research to really make an impact. And also, the subsequent weekend, he did makeup for a local opera production. And this opera production, it was an Egyptian opera with an all-white cast, and he did blackface makeup for the whole cast. So I believe it's carrying on. Yes, Michelle.
I have sort of a related question, which is, I'm just trying to figure out this guy's motivation. Like, why would he participate in your research? Like, does he not understand how he's being taken up?
He does understand how he's being taken up. One thing about it is that I actually went to high school with this person. So, so there was a familiarity to start the conversation for him, and also for me. He's completely aware of our position. He's signed all of the consent forms I could have possibly put in front of him. And that's all I can really say to that. He knows.
Interesting, thank you.
I was curious if he's read your final paper or attended your presentation. Just because I think that that'd be like an amazing moment. You know, either response questions or audience directed questions at him. I don't know. And then also I know that with ethnographic work and interview-based work, often you submit the final published paper, you know, to interviewees and whatnot. So I was curious if that was a plan.
Oh, of course, that's the ethical way to do it, and that's what we're going to do. So we do intend to publish this paper, extend it and publish it, and we will send, I'm not sure about the entire paper if we're ethically mandated to do that, but at the very least, it's interview quotes that we're using. So yes, and if he, as ethics prevail, if he wants to pull anything, then we pull those things and we talk about it differently. And if he doesn't want his images used anymore, then we pull those images.
It was just hilarious, the pictures of like all these blocked up faces, and he's like,
Yeah.
Like, why are the other people in blue face?
Blackface. I did actually kind of want to follow up on a few threads that people have been talking about. And this is something that continually interests me about this paper and about what Michael does. But he's continually asserting that he becomes Michael Jackson and that the audience thinks Michael Jackson is in the room. And I had a discussion with one of our fine graduate students here at the University of Winnipeg, and it kind of made me think, now, is this a sort of true drag in the sense that it's a temporary identity change, it's a change that seeks to reveal what is actually underneath it? And it seems to me that that's not what Michael says is going on. He does seem to appear to want to truly become a person of color, I think with a complete lack of understanding of what the implications might be of that. So I guess I just wanted to kind of underline that whole I'm becoming Michael Jackson thing and see if, I know that you discussed this with him and it wasn't sort of necessarily all that enlightening.
About his belief that he's becoming Michael Jackson? Yeah, I would say it's more, I don't, okay, so in trans-exclusionary radical feminists, they often make the link between blackface and trans women, and that trans women are as offensive as white folk in blackface. But to compare blackface and being trans is, according to me, a completely false equivalency and should never be discussed as such. And I think Michael's belief of him becoming Michael Jackson is more due to narcissism than anything else. That being said, the literature on blackface, especially Eric Lott's Love and Theft, speaks to a racial envy from white blackface performers, a racial envy based on notions of the hypersexuality of black men and also the stereotype of black men having larger penises than white men, and it's also a feature in a lot of historical blackface advertisements. However, it's interesting and funny to me that their jealousy about the stereotypes is the stereotype that they constructed themselves. So it's this continuous circle of being jealous about your own shit that you made up yourself.
And I did actually just want to have something, and I hate to raise this like with 2 minutes of discussion left, but when I was reflecting on all of these papers as I started to prepare for this, I was kind of thinking about the question, and I know we've started kind of interacting on this as well, but I wonder if there are contexts when blacking up might be okay. And I mean, David's given a suggestion that there could be times when it would just be good to be confrontational about it, to just get it in your face and do it, and and then have those kinds of interactions. But I mean, I think about, for example, the Turkish soccer team, which had planned to do a protest in May 2013 against banana throwing against Didier Drogba and monkey chants by the rival team. And so they said, if, I guess Drogba was one of the few black players on the team, and the other members of the team said, well, next game we're going to be going out in blackface. And I actually can't find out, I tried to find out on the internet whether they actually did it or not. But I think, in some ways probably the threat was as good as anything else. But I have some difficulty, I have some ambivalence, but I have some difficulty seeing a a group doing something like that as an in-your-face, you know, we are protesting racism by other people by pointing out, you know, that there is something going on here. And I think, you know, it kind of reminds me of some of the practices that Katrin was talking about. And so I would be interested if at some point we could think about, is there okay blackface?
I know it's like close to end, but I wanted to just throw this out there because it's something as a artist and spoken word artist is a struggle I always have, and it's not entirely related to blackface, but I'm doing a lot of thinking around the politics of hair, and I did do a little skit where I was wearing an afro, but I did it on purpose because I was pushing the boundary on my sexual identity and in terms of the beauty in what the afro brings and my connection to Africa. But it opened up another dialogue, and the dialogue was around the racialized aspect for my black women friends of what the construct means for them, but also in my own community, the dialogue on how black people, women would be depicted in terms of the sexualized nature within my own community, and that's what I was fighting to open that dialogue. But it puts me in the space of, so how do I open the dialogue in a way to make my own community realize what's being said or done is racist, but at the same time, it's a racially construct. And my black women friend said, at the cost of what identity? Which I thought was really important. At the cost of who am I performing at the cost of who? And I think that's a really important question for me to keep it. I'm only saying me because I don't want to appropriate voices, but it's important to keep in mind as a spoken word artist and performer.